it's not surprising to us that he keeps folding, as Belinda said, and he backs down at the last minute, says, oh, I can't handle the pressure. I'm only the premier. I can't do it. Everyone's telling me to do the opposite. But behind the scenes, Dave, the sinister thing is he does the opposite of what he tells his voters or former voters.
Well, folks, F is for Ford and F is for flip-flop. And once again, Premier Doug Ford is flipping and flopping. Do you remember just a month ago when Premier Ford said that there would be no mandatory vaccine for the province of Ontario? He didn't want a two-tier citizen system in Ontario. And here's what he had to say.
But the answer is no. We aren't going to do it. We aren't going to have a split society.
Okay, but as the saying goes, that was then and this is now. And it looks like almost a certainty Ontario will indeed be getting a mandatory vaccine passport, despite what Premier Ford had promised before. Gee, where have we heard that? Joining me now to weigh in on this very important issue in terms of as the Ford flip-flops is Jim Karahalios, who is the co-founder of the New Blue Party, and his wife, Belinda Karahalios, who is an MPP and the president of the New Blue Party. Hey, guys, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, David. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Dave.
You got it. So, guys, I don't understand. Doug Ford was dead set against this. He didn't want a two-tier system when it came to Ontario citizenship. And then suddenly he's changed his mind. Or is this yet again perhaps his inner circle saying, you better do this? What are your thoughts?
Well, Doug Ford on many occasions, or actually, in fact, the last 3 years have been him saying something publicly and then flip-flopping on it, to the point now we're calling him Doug Fold, because he's folding on everything that he's been saying for the last 3 years.
You know, it's not new. It's nothing new, Dave. He'll tell the public and the media a certain thing because he's got 2.3 million votes in that last election in 2018, and he doesn't want to lose them. But immediately after he says something to the media, the wheels start turning on the inside of Queen's Park, and the lobbyists and the Ontario PC party with their left-wing ideologues start implementing things that are contrary to what Doug Ford is saying. And it's very sinister and underhanded that he does this continuously. It's not like he changed his mind in a day. This vaccine passport for COVID that he's been putting it in has been in the works for weeks. It's not just something that came up a day or two ago, Dave.
So, Jim and Belinda, is it a matter of, when it comes to selling his reversal in terms of the mandatory passport, we keep hearing about this Delta variant and how potentially deadly it might be. Is this his way out of saying, well, look, a month ago when I said no mandatory vaccinations for Ontarians, that was before I saw how bad the Delta variant might be, according to my medical advisors. Does that carry any water with you?
So there is no way out with Doug Ford. So it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It became one lockdown, two lockdowns, three lockdowns, and then it was mandatory masks, indoors, sometimes outdoors. They just keep moving the goalposts. And then they tied our freedoms to vaccination rates, which again, we saw moved again from it was 75% to now it's 90% of the eligible population. And people have had enough. And so this vaccine passport is just another, pawn in his game where he has no plan. He doesn't know when it's going to end. And the people of Ontario are just stuck having to deal with this.
You might remember, Dave, last year, Belinda voted against Bill 195. She was the only PC MPP, current or former PC MPP, to vote against it. And he kicked her out of the party and kicked 18 people from the Cambridge PC riding board right out. But Belinda was saying it from back then. He's got no plan to get things back to normal or reopen the economy. She knew that from back then. We still hear that from inside sources in the PC party. He wants to stretch this out for as long as possible. So he'll say things like, we got step 3 and we're almost there. And it's not surprising to us, although it's discouraging to the public, it's not surprising to us that he keeps folding, as Belinda said, and he backs down at the last minute, says, oh, I can't handle the pressure. I'm only the premier. I can't do it. Everyone's telling me to do the opposite. But behind the scenes, Dave, the sinister thing is he does the opposite of what he tells his voters or former voters.
You know, that's so sad to hear. And you're absolutely right. Belinda, of course, used to be in caucus, kicked out because of the position she took on that. And we have to raise the point of Rick Nichols, guys. Last week, Doug Ford gave an ultimatum, and he wasn't bluffing. You get double vaxxed by Thursday at 5 p.m. or you are out of here. And sure enough, Rick Nichols gave a 4 p.m. press conference that no, he's not taking the jabs, and out he went. What are your thoughts on what happened to Rick Nichols, and also the fact that I had an interview recently with Mr. Nichols, and he said that Paul Calandra, the House leader, had come to him saying that the NDP and the Liberals are upset. They don't want you coming back to the House when it resumes sitting in September. And they want you to quietly resign, or they will force you out, which would be an Ontario first. What do you make of that?
Well, good for Rick for standing up for himself. I will say that because the PC party is full of bullies, and they will pressure you to do what they want you to do. At the end of the day, all MPPs are civil servants or public servants. We're accountable to our constituents. But when it comes to this particular situation, that was his choice, just like it's everyone else's choice, whether or not you get vaccinated. And if the NDPs and the Liberal and the PCs are uncomfortable with his personal medical choice, that's their problem.
And what's also disgraceful about the whole incident, Dave, is number one, the idea that a representative of 100,000 plus people in a riding won't be able to hold his position as deputy speaker or possibly even get to go to Queen's Park to vote. I guess you have to have a certain political philosophy to be allowed to vote at Queen's Park, even if you get elected by the people. But the entire Rick Nichols saga, Dave, it shows one thing. There's no working with inside the system of the Ontario PC Party. We tried it with Axe the Carbon Tax, fighting voter fraud. The establishment threw everything at us. They sued us. They kicked Belinda out. They kicked 18 people off the riding board out. They rigged conventions against people who run for party executive. They don't have nomination races. And Rick Nichols is a perfect example of someone for 10 years in his political career. He compromised because the establishment keeps saying, just work from within, work on the inside. Don't be like Jim and Belinda. Don't be disruptors. And what did it get Rick at the end? Nothing. He got booted at the first chance they got, and it's always with these guys, toe the left-wing lobbyists, the ideology, the party line that comes from the top down, or you're gone. You get no voting rights, no say, forget your principles, forget what your constituents want. There's no working within the Ontario PC Party, and that's why we've got the New Blue Party of Ontario up and running, Dave.
Yeah, no, it's very sad what we've seen in recent years. And, you know, whether it's Rick Nichols himself or Ontarians at large, what do you make of the ethics of demanding a mandatory vaccination, guys? For decades, the feminist movement, their chestnut was my body, my choice when it came to the abortion debate. But now it seems to be your body, government's choice, or else. What's happening?
It's amazing, isn't it? Like, I can't believe that we're actually having this discussion and that we're here. People that are saying, like you said, my body, my choice. The people that were saying, you know, segregation and discrimination are bad are now, like you said, saying your body, my choice. And we need to segregate and discriminate against people for their personal medical decisions. And the fact that even asking people if they've been vaccinated is now becoming normalized. Like, this is the environment that Doug Ford and the PC party have created. This is not COVID. This is their restrictions. This is them. And the tensions that you feel now out in the community, whether people are wearing a mask or not, it is palpable. And it is sad that we're here today in Ontario like this.
And it goes to show you my body, my choice. I was never a principle of any kind. It was just talking points. It was a slogan that the left would use for unfettered access for abortion so that we could be one of the only countries in the world that allowed for abortion all the way till the 9th month. But when it comes to vaccinations, that kind of slogan or principle or whatever they want to call it no longer applies. And it's the trajectory of the Ontario PC party and the conservative, quote unquote conservative, so-called conservative establishment in Ontario, which is on everything. You are not allowed to have a dissenting opinion or a dissenting vote because their egos, Dave, are so fragile. They are so sensitive that even with the super majority, if Belinda votes against Bill 195, if Rick Nichols says, I don't want to do what the rest of you are doing, they get so uptight with a little bit of criticism, with a little dissenting opinion, they just fall apart. Like, I don't even know what to say, Dave. They can't handle it, and they got to get rid of you. You got to be gone, and hopefully they don't even want you back at Queen's Park.
Oh, Jim, I know what you're saying. I mean, we've been covering since day one the protests going back to last year outside Queen's Park, which Doug Ford infamously labeled the protesters as being a bunch of yahoos. Now, I can tell you, almost everyone I've ever met at those protests, and I've covered almost every one of them, they admit back in 2018 voting Conservative, and it was like Doug Ford's basket full of deplorables moment. But I mean, in fairness to Hillary Clinton, she was aiming her guns at the enemy, Trump voters. Ford is aiming his guns at his base. What do you make sense out of that?
It's baffling that they don't even know who got them to where they are.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it just goes to show you the establishment, the PC establishment. They're progressive. They're a bunch of lobbyists. They corrupt the democratic process. And we'll see it again, Dave, next year at the provincial election. They're going to come around. They're going to tell everyone, they're going to go to the base. I'm sorry we said you guys are yahoos. I'm sorry. Just one more time because we can't afford a liberal government. And we've got the New Blue Party to say it doesn't matter, Liberal, NDP, PC, you get the same policies with these guys as you do the other team. And it's time for something new and fresh with the New Blue Party.
And also, guys, I want to touch upon something. If you believe what the mainstream media is reporting, evidently there was a groundswell of institutions heavily lobbying for mandatory vaccinations. We're talking everyone from all the major banks to professional sports teams, such as the Toronto Blue Jays, which incidentally qualified for a national interest exemption back in July, because it's very important that we watch the Blue Jays blow games in the bottom of the ninth inning. Anyway, what do you say about that? Do you think the Ford PCs are getting enormous pressure from the business community to go ahead with this decision?
I think businesses are feeling like they're being backed into a corner. And what it is, it's the fear and the threat of a fourth lockdown. A lot of businesses in our province are hanging by a thread, and a fourth lockdown will kill them. They will not recover from this. And so people are scrambling toward this notion, this idea of a vaccine passport to say, please don't lock us down again. I think most business owners wouldn't choose this if they were guaranteed that there would not be a fourth lockdown. But we know, Doug Ford flip-flops and he passes the buck. Like he won't own any of the decisions he makes. It's the chief medical officer, it's the regional medical officers. What our business community needs is a commitment that they're not going to lock us down again and not impose or allow the medical officer to impose these restrictions where you have businesses being forced to turn away customers based on personal medical decisions.
And Dave, it's important to distinguish between the crony capitalists that are running big corporations that depend on government handouts or government favors on regulations versus small business owners that Belinda's hearing from in her riding and that we're hearing from across Ontario, and the employees of small businesses that work at restaurants, fitness facilities. No one's speaking out for them, the small business owner. When Doug Ford makes his strategy advisory board back in 2018, he surrounds himself and PC operations with lobbyists. When he invites people on caucus calls, it's been reported, these are lobbyists. These are not lobbyists being paid by mom and pop small businesses that employ most of the people in Ontario. These are big corporations, crony capitalists who are seeking out handouts from the government and changes to the regulatory system, and they will toe the party line with whatever government is in place so they can get the favors on the back end. They won't criticize the government So frankly, when it comes to principled positions, you can't really listen to the crony capitalists, Dave. You got to stick up for small business owners, defend the taxpayers, kind of like what Rob Ford used to say. But Doug doesn't believe in any of that because, as Rob used to say to me, my brother's a pinko, and now we're seeing it right in front of our eyes.
I think it's quite evident that Doug Ford is not Rob Ford. One last question before we wrap, guys. The New Blue Party, that's being positioned as a true conservative party. I'm curious, with all the other MPPs kicked out of caucus, Rick Nichols, Roman Baber, Randy Hillier, I know I'm forgetting a few. I mean, shortly this majority government is going to be a minority government at this rate. Is there any thought to having these exiled MPPs joining the New Blue Party? You'd have a critical mass that way, or are they rejecting your party for whatever reason? Last word goes to you guys.
So if you're going to join the New Blue Party of Ontario, you're either all in or you're all out. We don't want anyone who is going to have one foot in this party and then hoping that maybe if there's a leadership in the PC party, things will be different and they're going to go back in. Because we know from experience, as Jim said, there is no changing the Ontario PC party. It is corrupt to the core, and a change in leadership is not going to make a difference.
You know, it was disappointing, Dave, when we heard from Rick Nichols saying, you know, he was hoping to get back into the PC party by next year. And, you know, as we said, as Belinda said, we got a set of values and principles in the New Blue Party. And Victor's part of it, and he's got a set of values and principles, our son. And we don't want to compromise, Dave, and compromise to thousands of people across Ontario who've donated. We don't want to shortchange them and compromise our positions on certain stuff. But we've always been open and welcome to people to join.
Wow. And to think we thought we were out of the woods when we made Patrick Brown walk the plank. But as the Who once said, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Jim, Belinda Karahalios, thank you so much for your time and good luck in the weeks and months ahead.
Thanks, David.